Hello everyone, wherever you're tuning in from, whether it's the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, or anywhere else across the globe, welcome back. If this is your first time here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Today, we're diving into a story that is as heartbreaking as it is chilling, a story that exposes the dangers that can hide behind even the most ordinary lives. It was 10:48 p.m. on March 25, 2022, when 21-year-old Mackenzie Anderson made her final desperate call to emergency services. In that moment, she had no way of knowing she had only 2 minutes left to live. Her voice, calm yet trembling, painted a clear picture of fear, urgency, and an almost preternatural awareness of the danger closing in. Mackenzie, known to friends as Max, was everything her friends described: vibrant, full of life, and fiercely loving. She spent her days exploring the sun-drenched Newcastle coastline, dancing with friends until the first light of dawn, and capturing her life across TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Each post, each video, reflected her laughter, her energy, and her unrelenting love for her 1-year-old son, whom she affectionately called "my love bug" and "my caterpillar." But even as she smiled for the cameras, shared her adventures, and dreamed about a future filled with hope and love, a shadow loomed. Danger had been stalking her life for years, a presence that would soon erupt with unimaginable force. Now, before we go further, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from right now? And put yourself in Mackenzie's shoes. What would you do if someone you trusted was quietly planning to destroy your life? Comment below. I read every single response, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Not long before tragedy struck, Mackenzie met Tyrone Thompson. On the surface, Tyrone was charming, thoughtful, and seemingly perfect for her. He understood her struggles in a way few could, and for a moment, it seemed like Mackenzie had finally found someone who could walk alongside her through life's challenges. But Tyrone carried a past that few could fathom. His childhood was steeped in trauma: a violent schizophrenic father, sexual abuse by a teacher, constant exposure to domestic violence. These experiences left Tyrone with deep psychological scars. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder and a severe personality disorder. And while Mackenzie saw warmth and care, Tyrone saw control and obsession. From the very beginning, subtle signs hinted at his darker tendencies. The charm that drew Mackenzie masked a dangerous obsession, one that would grow quietly but relentlessly. Friends and family noticed small inconsistencies in his behavior: early possessiveness, and controlling patterns. What Mackenzie didn't know, however, was that behind the charm lay a mind capable of extreme violence. This wasn't a man struggling with emotion, this was a man calculating, observing, and preparing. And the first signs of manipulation soon appeared. Tyrone's early actions weren't overtly violent but were insidious, designed to erode Mackenzie's independence and confidence. He isolated her from friends, questioned her decisions, and made her doubt her instincts. All while maintaining the facade of love and concern. The first real escalation was subtle, almost imperceptible to the outside world, but to those paying close attention, it was unmistakable. Tyrone was slowly taking control, and Mackenzie's life was about to be consumed by a darkness she could not yet see. The signs of danger soon became impossible to ignore. Tyrone's controlling behaviors escalated into monitoring, minor acts of physical aggression, and psychological manipulation. Mackenzie's friends began noticing bruises, marks that spoke of a hidden battle and a relationship turning increasingly toxic. Realizing the severity of the situation, Mackenzie reached out to domestic violence services, seeking help, protection, and guidance. She installed security doors, considered cameras, and tried everything the system advised to keep herself and her child safe. But even these measures could not stop what was coming. It was during this time that Mackenzie confided in her friends, speaking with a terrifying certainty, "He will kill me." It wasn't panic. It wasn't exaggeration. It was a prediction born of intimate knowledge of her abuser, a fear that would tragically come true. Now, I want you to think for a moment, if you were Mackenzie, surrounded by warnings, aware of the danger, yet feeling trapped, what would you do? Comment below. Share your thoughts. This is the kind of story that makes us all ask ourselves how far we'd go to protect those we love. The escalation didn't stop at words or bruises. Tyrone's obsession grew more intense, every day tightening the noose around Mackenzie's life. What started as subtle psychological manipulation evolved into something far more sinister, a web of control that would eventually consume everything she held dear. And as the days passed, it became clear that the danger was imminent, inevitable, and terrifyingly real. By October 2021, Tyrone Thompson's escalating violence could no longer be ignored. He was arrested, charged with assaulting Mackenzie, intimidating her, and damaging property. For a brief moment, it seemed like justice might prevail. Mackenzie finally felt she could breathe, thinking the legal system would provide the protection she desperately needed. But that hope was short-lived. Tyrone's sentence, a mere 10 months imprisonment, later reduced on appeal, was far from adequate given the pattern of his behavior. Even while behind bars, Tyrone's obsession with Mackenzie didn't diminish. In fact, it festered, growing stronger each day, while Mackenzie remained under the illusion of safety. Even more concerning were the repeated breaches of the Apprehended Violence Order, AVO, he committed after his release. Each violation, 8 in total, was a clear warning to authorities that Mackenzie's life remained in danger. Yet, for reasons that remain baffling, Tyrone remained free to continue stalking, harassing, and terrorizing her. Here's the chilling part: Mackenzie had followed every legal procedure, taken every precaution, and yet, the system she relied upon had failed her completely. The law that was supposed to protect her had become little more than a piece of paper in the hands of a man determined to destroy her life. And as Tyrone walked free despite mounting evidence, the question loomed. How could Mackenzie survive a man whose obsession knew no boundaries? With the system failing her, what would Tyrone do next, and how much time did Mackenzie really have before her worst fears became reality? March 9, 2022, Tyrone was released from prison. Within hours, the nightmare reignited. He immediately breached the conditions of his parole and the AVO, reaching out to Mackenzie through phone calls, text messages, and even multiple social media accounts after she blocked him. Mackenzie's world shrank further. Each day, her anxiety grew. She couldn't walk down the street, go shopping, or even sit at home without wondering if Tyrone was watching. The psychological toll was immense, tracking her movements, reaching out to friends and her new partner, planting seeds of fear everywhere he went. And while Tyrone seemed calm on the surface, there was an unmistakable calculated intensity to his actions. Each call, each message, each unexpected appearance was part of a larger plan, a campaign of obsession designed to control Mackenzie completely. Friends noticed her constant nervous glances at windows, her texts asking them to check on her, her hesitancy to leave her home alone. It was clear, her world was shrinking under the weight of a terror that seemed unstoppable. As the days passed, it became obvious that Tyrone's obsession was reaching its peak. Mackenzie's intuition screamed at her. Her worst fears were about to come true. March 24, 2022. Just one day before the final tragedy, Tyrone breached the AVO yet again. A minor incident to outsiders, but for Mackenzie and her friends, it was an unmistakable warning. Danger was escalating, the clock was ticking, and every small moment of calm was just a pause before the storm. Mackenzie's daily life had become a careful balancing act. She monitored her surroundings, sent texts to friends, and avoided situations that could place her in Tyrone's path. Each little victory, a friend checking in, a quiet evening at home, was quickly overshadowed by anxiety, anticipation, and the fear that Tyrone could strike at any moment. Even as she tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy, the tension was palpable. Every knock at the door, every phone notification, every shadow outside her window was a reminder that she was not safe. The world she had built for herself and her son had been infiltrated by a man whose obsession refused to respect boundaries. Now, imagine yourself in Mackenzie's shoes. You've taken every precaution, you've followed every rule, and yet the threat keeps returning. What would you do if faced with repeated harassment and imminent danger? Comment below. I want to hear your thoughts. The night of March 25th loomed like a storm on the horizon. Every warning sign, every careful precaution, every desperate call for help had led to this point. Mackenzie's fate was about to collide with Tyrone's obsession in a way no one could have predicted. March 25, 2022, began like any other day, yet there was an underlying tension that Mackenzie could not shake. To outsiders, she was simply a young mother going about her life, but in reality, she was acutely aware that danger was never far away. She spent the afternoon with a close friend at her Crebert Street apartment in Mayfield, attempting, as best she could, to maintain normalcy. Laughter and conversation masked her inner fear, though she remained vigilant, scanning the windows and doors, noting every sound. Tyrone's presence, even in absence, was a constant threat. Earlier that day, he had begun moving knives around the kitchen, placing a large blade on the counter in plain sight. It was a silent, terrifying warning, a clear message that violence was imminent. Mackenzie's heart raced as she recognized the significance. He was preparing, and she was acutely aware of the danger. Despite the precautions, Tyrone seemed to leave peacefully, and Mackenzie allowed herself a fragile moment of relief. But instinct, honed by months of fear and vigilance, screamed at her that this calm would not last. As night fell, Tyrone returned, breaking into her home while she slept. Mackenzie awoke to the violating presence of Tyrone in her bedroom. He held her phone as if he belonged there, a chilling reminder that she was no longer safe in her most private space. Desperation drove her to call Australia's emergency services. Her voice was calm but urgent. "My ex-boyfriend has broken in. I have an AVO on him. He came at me with a knife." Every word revealed her understanding of the imminent threat and her fight to survive. Moments later, she sent her final text to her friend, words that now serve as a haunting timestamp of the terror she faced: "Don't leave me alone with him." At 10:48 p.m., Tyrone's fury erupted. Over the next 120 seconds, Mackenzie Anderson was stabbed 78 times with 2 kitchen knives. The sheer ferocity of the attack was shocking, so intense that one knife snapped under the force of repeated strikes. Despite the horror, Mackenzie fought for her life. She tried to escape, screamed, and resisted every blow. Neighbors heard the struggle and called police while others rushed outside to intervene. A witness peered through a gap in the block door and saw Tyrone standing over her, silent and methodical, ensuring that she could not survive. What made this attack even more horrifying was its calculated nature. Mackenzie had done everything right, called for help, tried to escape, followed legal advice. But nothing could stop a man whose obsession knew no limits. This was premeditated violence, executed with terrifying efficiency. As police arrived, Tyrone was still there, bleeding from a hand injury sustained during the attack. He showed no remorse, no recognition of the enormity of his actions. For nearly 3 years, he maintained his innocence, claiming self-defense, forcing Mackenzie's family and friends to endure prolonged uncertainty and grief. The attack was not spontaneous. Every step, every movement, revealed Tyrone's deliberate intent. Mackenzie's careful precautions, her calls for help, and her attempts at survival were tragically insufficient against his premeditation. The investigation that followed uncovered a chilling web of stalking, AVO breaches, and premeditation. Police compiled evidence of social media harassment, phone records, and repeated legal violations, all pointing to a calculated and obsessive mind. Forensic psychiatrists confirmed that Tyrone, despite serious mental health issues, was aware of his actions at the time of the attack. He knew exactly what he was doing, proving that this was not a crime of passion but a deliberate and sustained assault. Investigators faced questions that shook even experienced officers. Why did the legal system fail repeatedly? How did someone with multiple warnings and a violent history remain free to commit murder? The investigation forced Mackenzie's family and friends to relive the months of fear and frustration they had endured. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think justice was truly served? Could this tragedy have been prevented if the system acted differently? Comment your thoughts below. Let's discuss. Justice, when it finally arrived, was bittersweet. Tyrone eventually pleaded guilty to Mackenzie's murder, and on May 2, 2025, Justice Richard Weinstein sentenced him to 22 years and 6 months imprisonment with a non-parole period of 15 years and 6 months. Mackenzie's family called it inadequate, a painful reminder of the prolonged suffering inflicted by his actions. But from tragedy came change. Mackenzie's mother, Tabitha Ackert, turned grief into action, petitioning for legal reforms to protect future victims. Over 30,000 signatures later, New South Wales Parliament passed legislation establishing a 25-year non-parole period for murdering a current or former intimate partner, marking a historic step in domestic violence law. Mackenzie's story exposes systemic failures in domestic violence protection while highlighting the courage of a family determined to prevent others from suffering the same fate. It's a story of heartbreak, but also one of resilience, advocacy, and justice slowly achieved. Let us take a moment to pause and remember Mackenzie Anderson. May her soul find peace, may her spirit be free from pain, and may her light continue to shine in the hearts of those who loved her. If you feel her story, if it touches you, take a moment to type Amen in the comments as a sign of respect and remembrance. Let's honor her life together. If Mackenzie's story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe for more cases, and reflect on the lessons it teaches us about vigilance, the law, and the courage to speak up. And remember, behind every headline, there are lives at stake, and sometimes, justice comes only after unimaginable loss.